Most people think they're losing because their strategy isn't good enough. They buy another course, they read another book, they tweak the plan, but let me tell you something that might shake you. It's not your strategy that's broken. It's your identity. You don't outperform who you believe you are. You don't rise above your self-image. If you see yourself as average, you'll sabotage extraordinary opportunities. If you see yourself as broke, you'll unconsciously reject wealth. If you see yourself as unqualified, you'll hesitate when it's time to lead. Your results don't follow your goals. They follow your identity. Until you become the person who naturally produces success, no strategy will save you, because strategy works for the person who already believes they deserve to win. So the real question isn't, what's the plan? The real question is, who are you becoming? Let me say something that might stretch you a little bit. You don't produce what you desire. You produce what you believe you deserve. And until you deal with that, no strategy, no blueprint, no opportunity is going to change your life in a permanent way. See, most people are chasing bigger goals without addressing smaller identities. They want a six-figure income, but they still see themselves as a minimum wage thinker. They want influence, but they still see themselves as insignificant. They want wealth, but they still identify as broke. And here's the problem. Your results will always stay loyal to your self-image. If deep down you believe you're average, you will unconsciously build an average life. Not because you lack intelligence, not because you lack opportunity, but because your internal thermostat is set to average. And every time success starts heating up beyond that setting, you'll cool it back down. You'll procrastinate, you'll overthink, you'll hesitate, you'll second guess. Not on purpose, but automatically. Why? Because your identity is trying to protect what feels familiar. Let's talk about deserving for a moment. Deserving is not about ego, it's about belief. If you don't believe you deserve wealth, you'll feel uncomfortable charging what you're worth. If you don't believe you deserve success, you'll underperform when big moments show up. If you don't believe you deserve to win, you'll shrink when it's time to lead. And here's what's powerful. The world will agree with your internal belief, not your affirmations, not your Instagram bio, your belief. Some people say they want more money, but watch how they speak about wealthy people. They call them greedy. They call them lucky. They call them corrupt. What they don't realize is they're disqualifying themselves, because if wealth is bad and they see themselves as good, then their subconscious will protect them from ever becoming wealthy. You will never outperform what you think you deserve. Your bank account is not a reflection of your strategy. It's a reflection of your identity. Your relationships are not random. They align with how you see yourself. Your discipline, your consistency, your courage, they all flow from the story you believe about who you are. And here's the good news. Identity is not fixed. It's formed. Most of your current identity was built by repetition. What you heard growing up, what you experienced, what you failed at, what people told you. But just because it was formed unconsciously doesn't mean it has to stay permanent. You can choose a new identity, but you don't choose it with words. You choose it with decisions. When you decide, I am the kind of person who finishes what I start, and then you finish something, even something small, you're casting a vote for a new identity. When you decide, I am disciplined, and you act disciplined once, you're raising your internal standard. When you decide, I deserve abundance, and you position yourself for it, you're shifting the thermostat. Deserving is connected to value, and value is connected to service. The more valuable you believe you are, the more boldly you serve. The more boldly you serve, the more the marketplace rewards you. But if you secretly believe you don't have much to offer, you'll hide. You'll play small, you'll undercharge, you'll underspeak, you'll underlead. Let me challenge you. If someone handed you $1 million opportunity today, could your identity handle it? Or would you self-sabotage because it feels too big for who you think you are? That discomfort you feel when things start going well, that's not fear of failure. That's fear of becoming unfamiliar. Your life will always match your internal permission level. If you only give yourself permission to make a certain amount, live a certain way, think at a certain level, you'll stay inside that invisible boundary. So the real work isn't just learning new strategies. The real work is expanding your sense of deserving. Start asking better questions. Not how can I get more, but who do I need to become to handle more? Not why is this not working, but what belief is limiting what I allow? Because when your identity rises, your standards rise. When your standards rise, your habits rise. When your habits rise, your results rise. It becomes natural. It becomes automatic. It becomes inevitable. You don't need permission from the world to deserve more. You need permission from yourself. And the moment you truly believe you deserve to win, you'll stop settling for less. Let's go deeper. Strategy is a multiplier. That's all it is. It multiplies what's already there. So if your identity is small, your strategy will multiply small. If your identity is fearful, your strategy will multiply hesitation. If your identity is powerful, your strategy will multiply power. And this is where most people get it twisted. They think strategy is the magic. They think if they just find the right funnel, the right investment, the right marketing script, the right morning routine, everything will change. But strategy doesn't create capacity. It reveals it. Give a powerful strategy to someone with a weak identity, and they'll under-execute it. They'll doubt it halfway through. They'll tweak it too soon. They'll abandon it before it matures. Not because the strategy failed, but because their identity couldn't sustain it. On the other hand, give an average strategy to someone with a strong identity, and they'll find a way to win anyway. They'll adjust, they'll refine, they'll persist. Why? Because they see themselves as someone who figures things out. And that self-perception changes everything. Strategy is neutral. Identity is decisive. Think about it like this. Money is a multiplier. If you're generous, money multiplies generosity. If you're insecure, money multiplies insecurity. The same is true with strategy. It amplifies who you already are. If you see yourself as inconsistent, you'll apply the strategy inconsistently. If you see yourself as disciplined, you'll execute with precision. If you see yourself as a leader, you'll lead the strategy. If you see yourself as an employee waiting for instructions, you'll hesitate inside the same plan. The difference isn't the document, it's the driver. That's why two people can take the same course, read the same book, attend the same seminar, and get completely different results. It's not information inequality, it's identity inequality. One person walks in thinking, I'm building something significant, I just need refinement. The other walks in thinking, I hope this works because nothing ever works for me. And even if they sit in the same seat, their outcomes will separate over time. Your identity determines your interpretation, and your interpretation determines your execution. If you identify as someone who struggles, every obstacle will confirm that belief. If you identify as someone who overcomes, every obstacle becomes proof that growth is happening. Same challenge, different multiplier. You don't rise to the level of your strategy, you fall or rise to the level of your identity. Let me challenge you with something. Have you ever noticed how some people sabotage momentum right when things start working? Sales increase, opportunities open up, visibility grows, and suddenly they slow down. They overcomplicate, they disappear, they need a break. That's not burnout, that's identity discomfort. Because when strategy begins multiplying beyond what their identity is comfortable with, they shrink the strategy instead of expanding themselves. Strategy is supposed to stretch you, but if your identity resists growth, you'll keep resizing the vision to match your current self-image. That's why the real upgrade isn't tactical, it's internal. Before you ask, what's the next move? Ask, who must I become to sustain the next level? Because the strategy for a six-figure earner and the strategy for a seven-figure earner might look similar on paper. The difference is execution stamina, decision speed, emotional control, and self-concept. Identity determines how long you stay consistent when results are delayed. Identity determines whether you see feedback as failure or refinement. Identity determines whether you take ownership or make excuses. And here's what's powerful. Once your identity shifts, strategy becomes simpler. You stop hopping from idea to idea. You stop chasing every new trend. You stop looking for secret formulas because you understand that the multiplier works best when it's applied consistently. When you see yourself as someone who wins, you don't panic during setbacks. When you see yourself as capable, you don't freeze during complexity. When you see yourself as valuable, you don't shrink in negotiations. Strategy doesn't create confidence. Identity does. And confident execution makes ordinary strategies extraordinary. So if you feel stuck, stop obsessing over the plan for a moment. Look in the mirror. Ask yourself, is the person I currently see capable of handling the results I say I want? If the answer feels shaky, that's not a reason to quit. That's a signal to grow. Because once your identity expands, even simple strategies produce exponential results. Strategy multiplies who you are. So become someone worth multiplying. Let me take this even further. You don't get what you want, you get who you are. That statement alone will dismantle a lot of illusions. Because most people are obsessed with what they want. They want more money. They want more freedom. They want better relationships. They want influence. They want peace. But wanting is not a qualification. Wanting is common. Everybody wants something better. The real separator is identity. You can want wealth all day long, but if you identify as someone who is bad with money, you'll make financial decisions that reinforce that identity. You can want a strong body, but if you identify as not disciplined, your habits will confirm it. You can want leadership, but if you identify as not that confident, you'll hesitate when it's time to step forward. You don't get what you wish for. You get what aligns with who you believe you are. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Success has to feel congruent with your identity, or you'll push it away, not consciously, subconsciously. Have you ever seen someone get a breakthrough and then somehow lose it? They get the opportunity, the income, the relationship, and then slowly but surely they undo it. That's not bad luck. That's identity correction. When your external results outgrow your internal belief, your mind will work overtime to bring your life back into alignment with who you think you are. That's why some people rise fast and fall faster. It wasn't the opportunity that failed, it was the identity that couldn't sustain it. If you see yourself as average, extraordinary outcomes will feel uncomfortable. If you see yourself as overlooked, recognition will feel suspicious. If you see yourself as behind, progress will feel temporary. Identity creates familiarity, and human beings crave familiarity, even when it's dysfunctional. So the question becomes, who are you being while you're chasing what you want? Because winners don't win by accident. Winning is natural for them. It aligns with their internal story. They don't say, I hope this works. They say, I'll find a way. They don't say, what if I fail? They say, what will this teach me? The language reveals the identity. And identity shapes behavior without effort. When you identify as a reader, you read without forcing yourself. When you identify as healthy, you choose differently without debating it. When you identify as a leader, you speak up even when your voice shakes. It's not about hype. It's about alignment. The reason some people struggle with consistency isn't laziness. It's misalignment. They're trying to perform at a level their identity hasn't embraced yet. They're trying to act like a seven-figure thinker while still seeing themselves as a survival-level operator. You cannot consistently behave in contradiction to who you believe you are. And this is why affirmations alone don't work for most people. You can say, I am successful, but if your internal narrative says, I've never been the successful one, your behavior will follow the deeper belief. Real transformation happens when your self-concept shifts. When you no longer see yourself as the underdog trying to catch up, but as the contender learning to dominate. When you stop seeing yourself as the one who struggles and start seeing yourself as the one who solves. Notice, I didn't say pretend, I said see, because identity is formed through evidence. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you cast a vote for a new identity. Every time you show up when it's inconvenient, you strengthen the story. Every time you refuse to quit, you rewrite the script. Over time, those small votes compound, and suddenly the behavior that once felt forced becomes automatic. The level that once felt intimidating becomes normal. That's when things accelerate. Because once success aligns with who you believe you are, you stop sabotaging it. You stop shrinking in big rooms. You stop apologizing for charging what you're worth. You stop playing small to make others comfortable. You don't chase validation. You operate from conviction. And here's the shift. Instead of asking, why am I not getting what I want? Start asking, what version of me would naturally have what I want? That question changes everything because it moves you from wishing to becoming. What habits would that version of you have? What standards would they tolerate? What conversations would they walk away from? What risks would they take? What excuses would they reject? You don't have to leap there overnight, but you do have to move in alignment with that identity daily. Because in the end, life doesn't respond to your preferences. It responds to your personhood. You don't get what you want. You get who you are. Let's make this practical. Your habits are not random. They are not accidental. They are not disconnected from your goals. Your habits are a reflection of your identity. You don't struggle with discipline. You struggle with seeing yourself as a disciplined person. Because when you identify as something, you act in alignment with it automatically. Nobody has to force a person who sees themselves as responsible to handle their responsibilities. Nobody has to beg a person who sees themselves as a leader to step up. Nobody has to motivate someone who sees themselves as a winner to prepare. The behavior flows from the belief. So when you say, I just need more discipline, what you're really saying is, I haven't fully embraced the identity of someone who does this consistently. Think about it. If someone offered you $10 million to wake up at 5 a.m. tomorrow, you wouldn't struggle with discipline. You'd be up at 4:30. Why? Because in that moment, the action aligns with a powerful reason and a clear identity, someone who handles big opportunities. The issue isn't your ability, it's your identity attachment. When you see yourself as not a morning person, you'll snooze. When you see yourself as bad at sales, you'll avoid calls. When you see yourself as not really a reader, you won't open the book. And every time you repeat the habit, you reinforce the identity. It becomes a cycle. Identity shapes habits. Habits reinforce identity. So if you want different results, you don't start by attacking the habit aggressively. You start by redefining who you are. Instead of saying, I'm trying to work out, say, I'm becoming someone who trains. Instead of saying, I'm trying to save money, say, I'm a person who manages resources wisely. Instead of saying, I'm trying to grow my business, say, I'm a builder. Language matters because language reflects belief, and belief drives behavior. But let's go deeper. Many people are emotionally attached to their current identity, even if it's limiting. They've worn the label for so long that it feels comfortable. I've always been like this. That's just how I am. Those statements sound harmless, but they lock you into patterns. The moment you declare, that's just how I am, you stop growing. Growth requires identity flexibility. If you've labeled yourself as inconsistent, you'll look for evidence to confirm it. If you've labeled yourself as unlucky, you'll interpret setbacks as proof. If you've labeled yourself as average, you'll normalize average effort. But what if you started labeling yourself differently? What if you decided, I am the kind of person who does hard things? Even if you don't fully feel it yet, every time you act in alignment with that identity, you strengthen it. Every completed task becomes proof. Every kept promise becomes evidence. You don't need massive transformation overnight. You need repeated alignment. Small actions, repeated consistently, rewire identity. And once identity shifts, habits stop feeling forced. They become natural. The reason some people look disciplined isn't because they're superhuman. It's because they've accepted an identity that makes certain behaviors non-negotiable. For example, someone who identifies as a professional doesn't skip preparation. It would feel wrong to them. Someone who identifies as healthy doesn't debate every food choice. It would feel inconsistent. Someone who identifies as a provider doesn't avoid responsibility. It contradicts who they believe they are. So instead of fighting your habits, elevate your identity. Ask yourself, what would someone at the next level do automatically? Then do that once. Then do it again. Then do it again. At first, it will feel unfamiliar. That's normal. You're stretching beyond your previous self-concept, but over time, repetition removes resistance. And here's the powerful part. Once your habits change, your confidence changes, because confidence isn't built through hype. It's built through evidence. When you repeatedly show up, you start trusting yourself. When you trust yourself, your standards rise. When your standards rise, your outcomes improve. It all connects. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your systems, and your systems are built on your identity. So if you want better habits, don't just create a checklist. Create a new self-image. Decide who you are becoming. Decide what that version of you tolerates and what they reject. Decide what is normal at that level, because once you truly see yourself differently, your daily actions will follow without force. Change the identity, and the habits will change themselves. Most people have it backwards. They think achievement creates identity. They think once I hit the goal, then I'll see myself differently. Once I make the money, then I'll feel successful. Once I get in shape, then I'll feel disciplined. Once I get the recognition, then I'll feel confident. But it doesn't work that way. You don't achieve your way into becoming. You become your way into achieving. Achievement is a byproduct. It's the echo. Identity is the voice. If you wait to become confident until after you win, you'll hesitate when it's time to compete. If you wait to become disciplined until after the results show up, you'll never build the consistency required to produce them. If you wait to become a leader until someone gives you a title, you'll always be waiting. The sequence matters. Become first, then achieve. Think about it. A champion doesn't wake up the day after the trophy and suddenly become a champion. They were a champion in private long before the public ever saw it. The trophy just revealed what they had already decided internally. That's why some people achieve something once and can't repeat it. They touch success, but they never became the person who sustains it. It was an event, not an identity. When you become first, achievement becomes inevitable because your behavior aligns automatically. You don't have to force yourself every day. You don't have to negotiate with your feelings. You act in harmony with who you believe you are. If you become a builder, you build, even when you don't feel inspired. If you become a disciplined person, you execute, even when it's inconvenient. If you become someone who finishes, you complete tasks, even when it's boring. Becoming shifts your baseline. Instead of asking, how do I hit this goal? Ask, who hits this goal naturally? That question changes your focus from tactics to transformation. Who earns at that level? How do they think? What do they tolerate? What do they no longer entertain? How do they respond to pressure? How do they handle criticism? How do they manage time? You don't need to copy personality. You need to adopt standards, because identity is really about standards. What do you see as normal? What do you see as acceptable? What do you see as beneath you? When your standards rise, your environment shifts. When your standards rise, your circle changes. When your standards rise, your calendar changes. And when those things change, results follow. But let me warn you, becoming requires letting go. You can't hold on to an old identity and expect a new life. You can't cling to I've always struggled and step into overflow. You can't cling to I'm just not that person and expect transformation. There has to be a decision point, a moment where you say, from this day forward, I am no longer operating as that version of me. Not because you feel ready, not because you have proof, but because you choose alignment. And at first it will feel like you're acting. It will feel unnatural. That's okay. Growth always feels unfamiliar before it feels normal. But the more you act in alignment with the identity you've chosen, the more authentic it becomes. Repetition turns intention into embodiment. Eventually, you don't have to think about it anymore. It's just who you are. That's when things accelerate, because once you've become the type of person who executes, who learns, who adapts, who persists, strategies become tools instead of lifelines. Opportunities become amplifiers instead of miracles. Challenges become training instead of threats. You stop chasing outcomes and start embodying standards. And when you embody standards, outcomes chase you. So don't focus only on the scoreboard. Focus on the self. Don't obsess over the results. Obsess over the identity producing them. Don't ask, when will I achieve? Ask, who am I becoming? Because when you become the right person, the right results can't stay away from you. Become first, and achievement will have no choice but to follow.